Hey, welcome back. So today, we are diving deep into one of the most fundamental processes in, well, all of biology, glycolysis. It's this ancient, elegant, and absolutely essential pathway that literally turns the food you eat into the energy that powers your every move, every breath, and yep, every single thought. I mean, really think about that for a second. How does that sandwich you had for lunch actually turn into the raw energy your brain needs to even process this sentence? Well, the answer starts with a 10-step chemical dance called glycolysis. Okay, let's kick things off by meeting the hero of our story, glucose. This simple sugar, which comes from the carbs we eat, is the body's main fuel. You can think of it as the raw material, but the real energy currency our cells spend is a molecule we're going to be tracking called ATP. See, your body has this brilliant internal system, sometimes called a glucostat, that basically acts like a thermostat for sugar. It's working 24/7 to keep your blood glucose in a really tight, healthy range. And that balance is absolutely critical for a steady supply of energy, making sure all your systems are running smoothly. So, how exactly does the cell cash in on all that glucose? Well, that's where glycolysis comes in. We're going to follow just one single glucose molecule as it gets broken down to release all that sweet, sweet energy. The name itself pretty much gives the game away. Glyco means sugar, and lysis means breakdown. Literally, the breakdown of sugar. It's that simple. And get this process has been around for billions of years, powering the very first forms of life on this planet. Glycolysis is just incredibly versatile. It happens right in the main fluid of the cell, the cytosol, and, this is key, it can work with or without oxygen. That makes it an absolute superstar for the brain, and it's the only game in town for cells that don't have mitochondria, like our red blood cells. And on top of all that, its byproducts are even used as building blocks for other important stuff like fats and amino acids. All right, so glycolysis happens in two main phases. And the first one, well, you can think of it like a startup business. You got to spend a little money to make money, right? The cell has to do the same thing. It has to spend a little energy up front to get ready for a big profit later on. So here's how that investment works. First up, an enzyme called Hexokinase spends one molecule of our energy currency, ATP, to basically slap a phosphate group onto the glucose. Why? This traps it inside the cell. It can't escape now. Then, a few steps later, another enzyme, PFK1, spends a second ATP. And this is the big one. It's the point of no return. That glucose molecule is now officially locked into the glycolysis pathway for good. Okay, so after this whole first phase, we're actually in the red. We've spent 2 ATP molecules. Our energy balance is -2. But hey, don't worry. The payoff is just around the corner. And here we go. Welcome to the energy payoff phase. This is where all that initial investment starts to pay off big time. So that 6-carbon sugar molecule we prepped, it's about to get snipped right in half by an enzyme called aldolase, which acts just like a pair of molecular scissors. It creates 2 3-carbon molecules. And this is super important. From this point on, everything we talk about happens twice for each original glucose molecule. It's like we've just doubled our production line. All right, now the profits start rolling in. First, an enzyme creates a molecule called NADH. Just think of this as a little rechargeable battery the cell can use later for a huge energy boost. Right after that, boom, we get our first direct profit. An actual ATP molecule is made. Then, at the very end of the line, as the final product pyruvate is made, we get another ATP. And remember, since this all happened twice, that's a pretty tidy profit. So, how much are we talking about here? In this payoff phase, we've generated a grand total of 4 ATP molecules. So let's recap. We spent 2, but we just made 4. Not a bad return. Okay, so we've done it. We've turned one glucose molecule into 2 molecules of something called pyruvate. But wait, the story's not over yet. Pyruvate is now standing at a fork in the road, and its fate now hangs on one simple question. Is there oxygen around? Okay. So, if oxygen is available, that's what we call an aerobic state. The pyruvate heads into the cell's powerhouse, the mitochondria, gets turned into acetyl-CoA, and then enters a whole other cycle for a massive energy payout. But what if there's no oxygen? That's anaerobic. In that case, the pyruvate just stays put in the cytosol and gets converted into lactate. This might not sound great, but it's actually a really clever trick that lets glycolysis keep running at full speed. And I guarantee you've felt this yourself. You know that feeling when you're in an all-out sprint and your muscles are just screaming for oxygen? They switch over to this anaerobic glycolysis and they start pumping out lactate. That burning sensation in your muscles? Yep, that's laxate. And that's this anaerobic pathway going full throttle.
All right, time to do the final accounting. We put in 2 ATP, we got 4 ATP back out. So after all that, what's our actual take-home net profit from one little molecule of glucose?
So, under anaerobic conditions, like that sprint we talked about, the math is easy. We get a net profit of 2 ATP. It's super fast, but not a huge payout. But if we have oxygen, remember those little NADH batteries we made? Well, in the mitochondria, they get cashed in. And that bumps our total profit way up to a much nicer 6 or 8 ATP from glycolysis alone.
Okay, I know what some of you might be thinking right now. Hexokinase, PFK1, aldolase, wow. That's a ton of weird names to remember for all 10 of these steps. Well, since you've stuck with me this far, I've got a little reward for you. There's actually a super simple trick to remember all 10 of those enzymes in order.
Okay, you ready for this? It's a classic that students everywhere use. Good people eat all the great food preparing perfect plates. The first letter of each of those words lines up perfectly with the first letter of each of the 10 enzymes, starting with hexokinase all the way down to pyruvate kinase at the end.
It's a really simple way to remember what is, honestly, a brilliant biological process. When you think about it, from a simple sugar molecule to this vital fork in the road, glycolysis is really the foundation of how we create energy. And that kind of brings us to one last big thought. This whole process, it's ancient, it's universal, it's incredibly tough, but it's not invincible. So what happens to our body, to our health, our energy, our entire metabolism, when just one single step in this 10-step chain breaks down? Because that's where the story of energy often becomes the story of disease. Thanks for joining me.